billionaire bill, the big ugly bill, the bill that gets uglier the more that we learn about it. They call it reconciliation, but that's just between the right and the far right in the Republican Party. That's the bill that we're talking about. And they passed it, and now it's heading over for the United States Senate. And this budget reconciliation process allows Congress to pass major changes to the federal budget with a simple majority in each chamber. This means that Senate Republicans need just 51 votes to pass this terrible bill into law. And with this big billionaire bailout bill, Republicans want to drive up your energy bills, undermine your future by ripping away over $500 billion in incentives and programs for affordable and reliable clean energy, while rubber stamping fossil fuel projects and slashing funding for reducing pollution. And Republicans are also trying to gut federal programs that help make college accessible for working class Americans, all while they try to funnel $20 billion towards private schools. And rather than help the American people, Republicans want to benefit their big oil buddies. So if enacted, Republican energy and climate cuts will eliminate 840,000 jobs over the next 5 years, which is unbelievable. Just eliminate jobs that would have been created in the clean energy sector. Work sites and factory floors around the country could grind to a halt. Thousands of union workers, and that's who was going to be a principal beneficiary of the bill, new union jobs, they're going to lose their jobs. They're going to lose their livelihoods in red states and in blue states. Trump and Republicans have declared war on the Green Revolution built by and for union workers. And that's not all. The bill is going to increase, on average, annual household energy costs by $150 by 2030 and add the same planet warming emissions as 72 million new cars on the road each year by 2035. And Republicans are also turbocharging pollution while eliminating programs that help us breathe cleaner air. This means more asthma, more cancer, more deaths, and the education cuts in the bill are more of the same. Trump and Republican playbook: steal from working people to give to the wealthy. The Republican proposals would eliminate federal student loan protections that allow first generation and low income students to achieve the dream of college. And for the millions of student loan borrowers struggling each month to make their payments, putting off dreams of home ownership or even retirement, this bill rips away hope. Their bill is a threat to our right to a livable future where every single family can thrive. They slash Medicaid, Medicare, the Affordable Care Act, funding for the VA. 83,000 employees are going to be fired. But we have the power to stop these cuts. We just need 4 of the 53 Senate Republicans to join Democrats in voting against this bill. We just have to work fast. Senator John Thune wants to pass this bill by the 4th of July. That means we have just a few weeks to convince 4 Republicans to vote against the big billionaire bill. It's not too late to stop these cuts. Republicans can vote against it, and they must. And every person deserves the basic dignity, clean air, affordable energy, access to education, and health care. And we have to fight to make this a reality for every single American. We cannot agonize. We have to organize. We have until the 4th of July. It's absolutely going to be our Independence Day. We have to free ourselves. We have to beat this bill. And now, one of the greatest leaders in our country, someone who is always on the front lines of the battle for progressive ideas, but especially to make sure that every child is able to maximize their God-given abilities. We're going to hear now from Randi Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers. Welcome, Randi.
Thank you so much, Senator. I'm trying to make sure I can start my video.
There's a sinister tax loophole for billionaires hidden in Trump's big beautiful bill. It practically pays billionaires to redirect their tax dollars away from the federal government to private schools of their choosing. It sounds absurd, but that's exactly what the Educational Choice for Children Act, ECCA, would do. If you donate to a charity that feeds hungry kids, for example, you can take a deduction that reduces your taxes by about a third of what you donate. But the ECCA is a tax credit, so with the same donation to a private school voucher fund, your taxes get reduced by the entire amount of the donation. Which do you think billionaires are gonna do? They've effectively redirected their federal tax payment away from funding the military, disaster relief, infrastructure, food safety, groundbreaking medical research, and public schools. Instead, going into a voucher-granting organization of their choice, maybe even one they control. And what do these organizations do? They pay for the private school tuition of students from families that may earn up to $500,000. And as with all vouchers, they tend to go to families that are already able to afford private school tuition, so people who don't need the help. And private schools could join together to create voucher-granting organizations to collect donations from parents that pay their own kids' tuition, essentially making their private school free, all paid for by taxpayers. The ECCA dwarfs other federal tax credits. They usually have an income cap, allow only a % of the qualifying expense, or cap the amount you can claim. Not the ECCA. It's an unlimited 100% credit of up to 10% of their income, regardless of how wealthy they are. And billionaires can actually make money on a deal because they can avoid capital gains tax by donating stock instead of money. Here's how much some come out ahead based on past tax returns. So what's the overall outcome? Billionaires will pay less taxes overall. The federal government loses $5 billion in revenue each year, adding to the deficit. Private school families get a windfall. Public schools are weakened. Tell your lawmaker to oppose private school vouchers and the ECCA. Protect public education for everyone. There's a sinister tax.
I hope you enjoyed that. I'm trying to see if I can get on the video, which mine doesn't seem, it says sending video is disabled. So I hope you can at least hear me. If you can't see me, can people, I'm just listening, I'm just, I don't, good, I'm glad you can see me. I mean, I'm glad you can hear me, but every time I keep pushing this video thing, it doesn't seem to be going on. So I'll do this just by talking to everybody, kind of like the old radio. So I really appreciate, Senator Markey, you doing this teach-in. I think we have to do more and more of these things because what ends up happening in America these days is that a lot of people have so much to do that, and there's so few local newspapers and local coverage anymore that it's really hard to get to the real deal and understand what's really going on. And one of the things Donald Trump is very able at is that he is a very good communicator. Now, he lies a lot, basically lies all the time, but he does control every day in terms of the media. And as a result, it's very hard to get through. So for example, as Senator Markey just said, there are huge cuts, not only in the House bill on reconciliation, but even if the Senate, even if John Thune and others moderate some of these cuts, there's still huge cuts. We already saw, for example, the bill that they have on student aid. Essentially, anyone who's a parent who used to actually be able to get a parent loan to put their kids through college can't get it anymore. That's in the new bill. There's less limitations on Pell, but still huge limitations. Essentially, we haven't seen it yet, but if you look at the House bill, basically anyone who needed, children, adults, people who are disabled, people who are older, anyone who needed Medicaid or nutritional assistance. Those things are being cut hugely and being changed hugely to the point that there will be so much paperwork around Medicaid that we predict that over 14 and the changes to ACA are equally bad. We predict there's going to be 14 to 15 million people that lose their basic health care under the Republican bill. Children, people with disabilities, people in nursing homes. And then on top of that, you have all the cuts to schooling. And then on top of that, if a state wanted to, and you saw the video, so I won't kind of go through some of this, but on top of that, if you have a rural hospital and you have these huge cuts in terms of Medicaid, those rural hospitals are not going to survive. And then on top of that, if you are a state that's trying to do things that is better, that's trying to help more and more people, you're all of a sudden going to have a huge hole in your budget if you want to try to cover any of the work or any of the funding that would have ordinarily gone to nursing homes, to rural hospitals, to kids with disabilities, to kids who are getting their health care through Medicaid or CHIPS. That's the magnitude of some of the big ticket items that are in the reconciliation bill. But as Senator Markey said as well, there's a whole lot of things that they try to pull back. So all of the things that we did, or that Senator Markey, Senator Schumer, President Biden did in the Inflation Reduction Act to create tax credits so we could have these new industries, wind and other climate industries. Those are all being ratcheted back. So there are so many states, red states in particular, not just a state like New York, my state, or Massachusetts, but all of these things are going to be ratcheted back. So these small businesses who are already getting killed by the tariffs, the tariffs that we're going to all see with back to school, because what are these tariffs on? What prices have gone up? Prices for clothing, prices for school supplies, prices for cereal, the things that people actually really need and want. So this is what's happening with regular people. And who are the winners in this bill? Why are these cuts happening? To continue the tax cuts that had disproportionately helped the rich beforehand, and to add to them this time. So you basically have this huge wealth redistribution, not from the rich to the poor, but from the poor to the rich. The poor and the middle class and the working class are taking it on the chin because all the things that we rely on from the federal government are either being canceled, being ratcheted back by Doge and others, illegally, of course, or in this bill are being ended or curtailed. And what's the winner? The people who already have a lot of money. I don't begrudge them, but why would they not be paying taxes? Just like what you just saw in the way in which they're creating a piggy bank for vouchers. So it is in people's interest, somebody who's rich, it's in their interest to pay or to contribute to vouchers because they're going to end up paying less taxes. That's what's going on in this bill. And so that's why I'm so honored that we are having this teach-in, because it gives us an opportunity to show who's on whose side and who is actually fighting. Senator Markey, hint, hint, for the people who need a champion, and who's actually fighting, hint, hint, Ron Johnson, the Speaker of the House, all the John Thune, Donald Trump, they are all fighting for the people who already hugely benefited disproportionately from the last tax cut. So the real question then becomes, what do we do about this? And ultimately, what we do about it is, yes, we got to keep the calls, the emails coming. We have to make sure that we are meeting with members of the Senate and members of the House of Representatives, those who support us in wanting to have a safety net and wanting to have opportunity for all, and those who oppose us. Because even if they refuse to take a meeting, even if they don't want to hear anything, even if right now they are more afraid of Donald Trump than they have respect for their constituents, that's going to be really important in terms of an argument later on in September, October, November of 2026, when that's accountability time. November 2026, when we can say whose side were they on. But if we don't try to get them on our side, if we don't try to tell them the facts, if we don't try to tell them what their constituents really need, then they're going to say, oh, we didn't hear from you. So we need to do that even if we get a no, particularly if we get a no. And when we get a no, then we go out in the streets and we make sure that everyone else knows that we've gotten a no. And speaking of the streets, let me just end with one of the things I think we have to do now. I think what has happened in the last few weeks have been quite clarifying. Now, I happen to be a socialist teacher and I love teaching civics. And so it says a socialist teacher, not a socialist teacher, a social studies teacher. Social studies, thank you. And ultimately, what we need to do this Saturday is that we need to create a contrast. And the contrast is simply, as the President of the United States of America is giving himself a birthday party, not a birthday party at Mar-a-Lago or any of his other clubs, but basically on the streets of Washington. And he's having a military parade, kind of what Vladimir Putin does, or what, I don't know, the leader of North Korea does, what dictators do, what the leader of China does. They give themselves military parades where they have the military spend huge amounts of money taking their tanks out and other things and marching them through the streets of Washington. Now, I don't remember the last time we had one of these things. I bet there was one maybe in 1976, but I don't remember the last time. Certainly not in recent memory. But what's other people going to be doing? Other people are going to be marching too and protesting too, all across the country. 1,800 different protests. It's called No King's Day. And what are the rest of us doing, or many of us doing? We're basically trying to send a message to President Trump, but more importantly to the people of America, that says that army, that we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of that army that started in 1775, that started in Massachusetts in 1775, that army was about fighting against kings, fighting against a monarchy, fighting for a democracy, fighting for freedom. And as George Washington said, remember I said I was a social studies teacher, sorry, I love civics, but as George Washington said, he was going to be a president, not a king. We fought against a monarchy. We fought against having a king. We fought against having dictators. And the rest of us around the country are going to remind us that what we need to fight about, regardless of what our positions are on any issue, is that our democracy is how we have a voice. Our democracy is how people can stand up. And whether it's protest in a nonviolent way, or whether it's voting, or whether it's going to members of Congress, your senator comes to you, but going to members of Congress, that's what democracy is. 3 co-equal branches of government, a federal government and state governments that work side by side, not a federal government, a president who, over the objections of a governor, sends in the National Guard and sends in the Marines to actually militarize what is never militarized. This is a moment where our democracy is really at risk and at stake. And on Saturday, on No King's Day, many of us will be on the street saying, our country is about having presidents who are not monarchs, who are not kings, who are not dictators, but presidents who listen to the people and who want and who try to help people have a better life. So whether we're fighting this reconciliation bill or whether we're fighting to have a democracy, that is what we have to do as we the people. Thank you, Senator Markey, for doing all this work and for always being out there for all of us.
Absolutely incredible. You dropped the mic there, and you have absolutely laid out what the stakes are, and as you usually do, and that was just, yeah, it's scary. It's scary to think where we are right now, unless we stand up, unless we fight. So thank you,
Exactly.
Randy, for what you do on a daily basis, organizing the teachers, but organizing all the rest of us as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we're going to hear from Liz Becker of the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada.
Thank you so much, Senator Markey, for having me. And thank you, Randy, for your impassioned remarks and for your work protecting public schools. We really need all the help we can get right now for our public schools. As Senator Markey said, my name is Liz Becker, and I'm with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. And we are based in Las Vegas as well as Reno, so we cover the whole state. We work with a lot of partners on immigration, on housing, and on climate. And I'm a part of a group that works with People's Action nationwide, and we have a Green Schools cohort. And we do work with schools so that we can get to that equitable future that we all desire that's powered by clean, renewable energy. And here at Plan, we talk about how we're people and planet first. And this bill that we're discussing, this reconciliation bill, puts profit first and people and planet last. And we cannot allow the policies that are being proposed to pass into law in this country. And I'm going to talk about something that is in the Inflation Reduction Act that a lot of you might be less familiar with, and it's called direct pay. So if we could get the next slide, please. So a lot of you may have worked on the Green New Deal or on making sure that we passed really good policy in the Inflation Reduction Act. And one of the parts of the Inflation Reduction Act is a continuation of clean energy tax credits and making sure that they're available to nonprofits. So nonprofits usually do not have a tax burden, of course, and so any tax credit they're going to get is going to be in the form of a check. So what we call this is direct pay because a check comes at the end. So in the past, if nonprofits like schools or houses of worship or municipalities wanted to install clean energy and get a credit for that, they would have to go through a private company who would apply for that credit for them, and they would have to get financing in that way and then get the credit. The way that direct pay works is that nonprofits can finance their projects any way that they would like, but they just put them into service, and at the end, they get a reimbursement check. And this usually is about 30% of the price of what they installed, which could be solar arrays, wind, ground source heat pumps, or even battery storage or electric vehicle charging stations. And then you can get more money if you use American-made products, or if you are in an energy community, which is explained in the bill. It's a little complicated, but basically, if you're in a community that's been negatively impacted by the fossil fuel industry, you can get more money back. And this has already been used across the country, and it's very important that we keep this money available to these nonprofits. And if you follow the link that's in the chat, you can see the information directly from the IRS. And we've been doing a lot of work to get the message out because, as Randy stated, we have to do this in our communities and do these educational events and pop-eds because most people do not have the time to read through an 1,800-page bill and understand this information themselves. Next slide, please. So as I said, school districts across the country and other nonprofits have been able to access this money since 2023. And a lot of this money has been going to districts that are in red states or in red districts where they have a Republican member of Congress. And the reason for that is a lot of those areas were underfunded at the state level and did not have access to a lot of this technology. So Nevada is kind of a purple state. We have a Republican governor right now. Our whole congressional delegation is Democrats, except for in the north, up where Reno is. And so in that area, we've got Washoe County School District. They're installing ground source heat pumps, and we've been working with them to make sure that they get this money. They have just one school that's eligible for $1.7 million back. And down in Clark County, we have the 5th largest school district in the country. So Clark County School District spends $120 million a year on utilities. And when I first heard that number, and when people I chat with first hear that number, their mind is blown because we have a utility that is for profit and is owned by Berkshire Hathaway. And many of our communities across the country are in this same position. And so we're taking our taxpayer dollars that fund public schools, and we are returning that money to for-profit companies and their billionaire shareholders. And the other side likes to talk about all the waste, fraud, and abuse that's happening at the federal level. And my argument is using our tax dollars to go to for-profit entities that are burning fossil fuels is the epitome of waste. And we have been meeting with school board members and talking to them about how our public dollars should be going into making our schools more resilient and so that they can produce their own power. And once schools start producing their own power, they reduce their utility bills, and then they can take the money that's coming back in direct pay and they can roll that into other projects. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, most of the projects, so 60% of projects that have received direct pay and 85% of the total investment has been in red districts across the country. And if you're interested in looking at your own state, the link that was just dropped from Climate Power, they have examples state by state of how much money is available through the Inflation Reduction Act, not just through direct pay, but all of the different tax credits and grants that are made available and what we stand to lose if we get rid of all of these programs. Just in Nevada alone, we stand to lose $15.5 billion in investment and 21,000 plus jobs. And these are green jobs. These are the jobs of the future. In Clark County, we have a school, for example, that is a technical career academy, and they are teaching students how to install solar. And they also just installed solar at the school, and they're eligible for this tax reimbursement. So these are things that we really need to be fighting for and reaching out, especially if you have a Republican member of Congress or Republican senators, because we have to have their votes in order for this not to pass through the Senate. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, budget reconciliation is a very complicated process, as Randy mentioned as well, but the House version has already passed. And now we're in the Senate, and we're in this fight to make sure that the really bad things that were in the House version of the bill do not make it through the Senate. And one of the worst parts for climate is through direct pay. So direct pay is not a grant program. It's not competitive. It just means if you install this technology, you can get this tax credit. And the way that they've changed it in the House version of the bill is so that the tax credits have to be used by the end of 2028, which shaves 4 years off of the original date. And also that projects must begin within 6 months of final passage of the bill. This amounts to a complete ending to direct pay because, as anyone who's familiar with planning capital improvements knows, saying you have to begin the project in 6 months means that you aren't going to be able to have time to plan any new projects. So this is a repeal of direct pay that is on the table in this bill, and we must prevent that from happening. So last slide. The way that we can do this is by reaching out, as both Senator Markey and Randy mentioned. And I'm sharing here a tool that was put together by NEA, the National Education Association, and it's also shared by Undaunted K-12, which is a wonderful organization working with public schools to make sure that we get this information into the community. So in addition to filling out this action here and contacting your senators or your members of Congress, I highly recommend speaking to school board members directly if you know them. Go to your school board meetings, give public comment, and just make them aware that this money exists. When I started doing this work at Plan, our school district was going to leave this money on the table. They did not even realize this money was available. So please do the work in your communities to uplift this as much as you can. And I will pass it back to Team Markey, and thank you so much for having me today.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Liz, for the great job you just did. This is going to be a massive job destruction bill if they get to pass it. Otherwise, we're going to wind up creating hundreds of thousands, millions of new jobs, and a high percentage of them are union jobs. So thank you for all the work that you're doing out there in Nevada. And now let's just move on. But let's move from Nevada over to West Virginia and hear from Danny Parent of the West Virginia Citizen Action Group. Tell us the story from West Virginia, Danny.
Yes, thank you so much, Senator, for the time and the chance to speak before you guys, and to also share this space with Randy and with Liz from Plan. West Virginia Citizen Action is also a member of People's Action and People Planet First cohort. Love to see all of us out here doing the work. My name is Danny or Daniela Parent. I am the co-executive director of West Virginia Citizen Action Group. And I came to this work as a teacher who got really involved in my union organizing and realized very quickly the issue to our inability to fully fund our public insurance for teachers was in fact rooted in the fact that our state government was fully bought out by polluting industries, and that has politicized me through this process and is the reason I'm here with you today. So I also really appreciate the intersectionality of this evening. The big bad boondoggle bill, as we call it in West Virginia, is going to put West Virginia communities, especially those most vulnerable to pollution, at risk. With cuts to programs that would facilitate a fair economic transition in Appalachia, such as a grant program to replace gas vehicles with electric vehicles and our clean energy tax credits, West Virginians are going to lose out on the chance for safe and good paying jobs. Furthermore, these cuts to air monitoring, greenhouse gas emissions, data collection, and environmental review resources make our communities less safe and informed about the air that we're breathing and the water that we're drinking. West Virginians have suffered with generations of corporate pollution and economic exploitation, and this bill is just going to roll back what feels like a lifeline to us, a critical chance to escape this cycle of environmental injustice upon which our country was built and from which West Virginia continues to suffer and hold a significant portion of the burden. For example, a piece of this bill would has led to economic insecurity and the closure of the Green Power Electric Bus Facility in South Charleston, which was just lauded in our legislature last year in a bipartisan way. And that led to layoffs of, I believe it was over a dozen employees in that facility. The battery facility in Weirton from Form Energy that was going to manufacture grid stabilizing batteries to support our transition away from dirty fossil fuels was also impacted already. I cannot overstress to you enough how necessary these jobs and these green industries are in a state where more than 80% of our energy is still generated from fossil fuels and specifically from coal. More locally and more dear to my heart, West Virginia Citizen Action was a partner in a community change grant and had gone through the entire process and had received our scores, and we're very, very hopeful to receive funding. We had applied for over $13 million, $4 million of which was going to go to air monitoring, and the remaining to job development for the identification and plugging of orphaned oil and gas wells throughout our state. The loss of this money, the loss of those jobs, the loss of the work that we were planning with union operators within the state and in the region in order to do workforce development is so significant. And in a time where we are already struggling with jobs, it is especially difficult to talk about the economic transition and just the sheer amount of loss in desperate communities that we're already seeing. The air pollution reduction piece, the loss of the methane emissions reduction program, is going to be especially impactful in West Virginia as a state that's already struggling to manage our health needs. We have over 516,000 friends, neighbors, and family members on Medicaid in our state, 80% of whom are of working age and already working. And to see cuts not only to our ability to identify what's in the air and what's in our water and make decisions about our own health, but then to also lose access to our health care will be absolutely devastating. And this is not a new story. We are well known to be an extraction state, and we have really, really struggled to get to have access to our representatives and our senators in this time. I appreciate the call to action, and we have in fact mobilized folks to the Capitol just over the last few weeks and have not been able to secure a meeting directly with any of our representatives. And so we look forward to building power and to fighting this bill in the news and in the streets and together and organizing to push back against this. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Thanks for all of your great leadership on these issues. And you're there in West Virginia, so you know, with Form Energy and other companies, that's the future. Thousands of jobs will be created there. And thank you for standing up for that future. And so we started in Massachusetts, then we went to Randy Weingarten in New York, to Liz Becker in Nevada, Danny in West Virginia. And we're just going to keep traveling around the country as part of this teaching. And we're heading for the United Auto Workers, Region 2B, which is Ohio and Indiana. And welcome to Dave Green. Love to hear from you, Dave.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I work across Ohio and Indiana. I call them red and redder, representing about 180,000 workers. But I didn't always have this job as a director. I've been over 30 years paying my union dues happily as a UAW member, and I started in 1989 in Lordstown, Ohio, with 13,000 union workers in that facility, around 3 different plants. It was the lifeblood of the entire regional community and economy. And almost 30 years later, in 2018, I become the president of UAW Local 1112 in Lordstown. 6 months later, GM announces it's closing the facility. Right, so we lose 1,600 good UAW members' jobs and thousands more in suppliers, part suppliers, and jobs in the community. Right, really, people were forced to relocate, move all over the place. Some people quit. Right, some people committed suicide. It's a tough time when your work goes away like that. And at the time, right, there's a presidential campaign going on. Donald Trump's the president of the United States. He had a lot to say about that plant close. And I tell you, he came to Ohio and he told folks, don't sell your houses. All these jobs are coming back. It's going to be huge. It's going to be great. Right. And nothing that he said happened. In fact, he threatened to take away subsidies for GM. He called for tariffs on imported cars and then did absolutely nothing. He publicly blamed me for complaining about GM's actions, right? I mean, I had to keep fighting with General Motors, doing everything we can to keep this facility open. And here the President of the United States is coming after me. It was incredible. 6 years later, after that plant closes in 18, GM has put a joint venture there. And it's called Ultium. We're building cells. There are union workers there. These are good union jobs. But look, they're in trouble now, right? They're in trouble because the Inflation Reduction Act has some auto-related tax credits in there. Specifically for us in EV battery manufacturing, it's called 45X money, right? And what's gone through the House is going to radically change this. This gives these joint ventures. I got a facility in Kokomo, Indiana called Star Plus, which is a joint venture between Stellantis and Samsung, Altium, General Motors, and LG Chem. GM is building another joint venture. Honda is building one in Marysville, Ohio. And when they take this money away, these facilities aren't going to be able to operate. We're going to lose good union jobs, right? I mean, and this battery plant is right in the shadows of where the old facility was, where I worked and lived for most of my life. We got 1,600 workers right there at Altium, and their jobs are going to be at risk. They're good UAW jobs, making $30 an hour. This bill is going to really threaten that. It could have a dramatic impact on the auto industry, on dozens of investments across the entire country. Look, that's going to support jobs going away. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, we at the UAW have been critical of many aspects of the IRA tax credit or tax credits and a host of other policies for not going far enough to ensure that federal funding only supports good union jobs. We want to see the IRA, right? It needs strings attached. If you're going to give our tax dollars, we don't want corporate giveaways. We want those employers that are taking taxpayer monies to not pay low wages and help bust unions, right? The solution to that problem is to fix the credits, not to gut them completely. If you're getting billions in subsidies, you should be required to pay a decent wage and benefits, just the respect and the right to form a union. That closure in Lordstown demonstrated the need to use federal policy in support of domestic manufacturing. That is what the IRA got right, and what the Republicans need to protect. Trump closed Lordstown because he did nothing, right? He shouldn't close it again by cutting the funding that is supporting these good union jobs in Ohio and Indiana. And again, Senator, I thank you for having me on. Number one, we got to get our people out there. We have to mobilize, talk to your senators, talk to your congressmen, be active, talk to your neighbors, go to your school board meetings. It's correct. Get involved in your local community. If we don't use our voices, they're going to continue to take them away from us. And we have to fight for what's right. And I am always going to be on the front line fighting for good union jobs with benefits, because that's how we move this country forward, and that's how we built the middle class. So thank you.
Well, Dave, thank you so much. And obviously what you're saying is that these tax breaks right now are creating union jobs for us, Ohio and Indiana. And they're in technologies of the future, batteries for electric vehicles of the future. And I thank you, Dave, for all of your great work and for focusing upon the need for all of this to be pointing towards more union jobs as well. That's our responsibility as policymakers to make sure that we're incentivizing that. But your story, going back to the day that Trump was sworn in, is just it's a cautionary tale. It's a warning to all of us. So thank you, Dave, so much. Thanks for everything that you do. And next, we're going to hear from Michael Linden of Families Over Billionaires. And anyone who's here, I've already heard this presentation from Michael. This is brilliant. This is absolutely must viewing. So Michael, welcome again, and I'm really looking forward to getting a second dose of this medicine for what for this billionaire disease, which is afflicting our country right now.
There is. Well, thank you very much, Senator, and thank you for those kind words. You know, I have the fun task of explaining the tax provisions that are in this bill, and that introduction saying that this is exciting and engaging and must watch. You know that you don't usually get that when you talk about tax provisions, but it is important. And you know, you just heard incredibly compelling speakers talk about the impacts that this bill will have on education, on clean energy, on good union jobs. And you might be asking yourself, what are they doing with all that money where they're cutting all these things? They're cutting education, they're cutting clean energy, they're cutting union jobs, they're also cutting healthcare, they're cutting nutrition assistance. What are they doing with that money? Well, I'm going to tell you, they're giving it to billionaires and giant corporations in the form of more tax cuts. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute. My name is Michael Linden. I'm the director of Families Over Billionaires. We're a campaign dedicated to lifting up the voices of the vast majority of Americans who do not want to take away good jobs, raise people's energy costs, cut education, cut healthcare, cut food assistance, all to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. If you're feeling frustrated about the substance of this bill, you should know you are not alone. Most Americans agree with you. What we need to do is raise our voices, as the last speaker said. So what I want to do in this presentation is just take you through a little bit of what is in the tax giveaway part of this bill, because that is what's happening here. They have a massive bill that delivers huge tax cuts to very wealthy people and giant corporations, and they are partially paying for it with taking away healthcare, nutrition assistance, clean energy investments, good jobs, and education funding. That's what's happening. So if you go to the next slide, this is why I call this the billionaire tax scam. They say that it's a tax bill for everybody, but it is not. It is a tax bill designed exclusively for people at the very, very top. So let me explain why that is. So at the core of the tax provisions of this bill is a renewal of the 2017 tax law that Donald Trump passed when he was president the first time. That tax bill was itself a very large giveaway to people at the top. If you look at the next slide, you'll see the average impact that tax bill had on people in America by household income. So people at the very, very top, the richest 0.1% of Americans, got an average tax cut of well over $250,000 a year. People in the middle got a much, much smaller tax cut. It almost doesn't appear on the graph. People at the bottom were essentially entirely left out. And the reason that is because that tax bill included a bunch of provisions that were really disproportionately or sometimes exclusively for wealthy people and corporations. I'll give you just a couple examples. I'm not going to get deep into the weeds here, but one of the things, for example, the bill did was it lowered the top rate that wealthy people pay on their income. It also loosened the restrictions on how many deductions and special carve-outs and exemptions that rich people could use to lower their tax bill. It also included a new tax provision that was they call a small business tax cut, but actually 50% of it goes to millionaires. So those were just some of the things that they did in that bill, and that was the core of the 2017 law. Now, because that tax law expires this year, the core of this bill is a renewal of those provisions, but with some new provisions added on. So if you look at the next slide, you can see the estimates for this law, and you can see it's even more skewed to people at the top. The richest 0.1% are now going to get a tax cut closer to $300,000. And some analysts have found, including the nonpartisan official Joint Committee on Tax, has found that the bottom of the income distribution, people making less than $15,000 will pay more in taxes, while the rich get a huge tax cut. And the reason is that they've added new tax cuts, mostly benefiting people at the top. For example, I mentioned that tax cut that was supposed to be for small businesses. Well, in this bill, they expand it to things like private equity and Wall Street investment funds. That's not small business. Those are wealthy investors who get another tax break. Now, let's step back. If you go to the next slide, that's just the tax side of the bill, right? Those are the tax provisions, and if you put them all together, big tax cut for people at the top. It costs, over $3 trillion in tax cuts, with most of that going to the richest 5% of Americans. But as you've already heard tonight, there are lots of other provisions in this bill. And in addition to the ones you've heard about, there are cuts to health care and nutrition assistance as well. You put all of this together into one analysis: who pays more and who's going to pay less? That's the simple question. If this bill passes, who's going to pay more and who's going to pay less? And this next graph is going to show you that. There was an analysis from the conservative Penn Wharton Budget Center, and they find that the bottom 40% of Americans will pay more. Bottom 40% of Americans will pay more, while the richest will pay less. About half of all the benefits go to the richest 5%, and 40% of Americans will pay more. And that's because their healthcare costs will go up, their food costs, their grocery bills will go up, their energy costs will go up by taking away all these clean energy incentives. They will lose their jobs, their health, as you heard in the previous presentation. If you put that all together, middle class and low income families will pay more, while the rich will pay less. I wish I could tell you that that was it, but there's one more important thing to note. Next slide, please. I said that they are spending almost $4 trillion on these tax cuts, most of which go to the top, and they are cutting things like healthcare and food assistance and clean energy and education. But those cuts only cover about a quarter of the total cost of these tax cuts. So they are going to put the rest of that cost on the nation's credit card. They are going to incur more debt to pay for these tax cuts. Now, who's going to pay for that? At the end of the day, tax cuts for the rich aren't free. You know that you and I are going to pay for that. Rich people aren't going to pay for that. Everyday Americans are. So let's just quickly walk through the math, because you might be hearing some Republicans say that this bill does not increase the deficit. They are totally lying to you. Let me just walk through the math with the next slide. Okay, it's very simple, actually. They are spending almost $4 trillion on tax cuts. That's the bar going down. They are cutting about $1.2 trillion in funding. That's healthcare, that's clean energy, that's education, that's nutrition assistance. But you can notice that the bar going up is much smaller than the bar going down. So the difference between those is more debt. And more debt means more interest costs on the debt to pay that debt back. So if you put it all together, it's almost $3 trillion in debt that will be added because of this bill. And you know what's going to happen. It's already happening now. Republicans in Congress will say we have too much debt. We can't afford things like education and more health care and investing in everyday Americans and bringing jobs home and things like that. They're going to say the debt's too big. The deficit's too big. We can't afford those things. They have been cutting taxes for 25 years. And now they say we don't have enough money to make sure that people have a decent meal on their table, or health care, or a good job that pays decent wages. That's the biggest problem with the deficit, is that they will turn around and say we can't afford these things. But it will have other effects too. Higher risks of higher interest rates and higher costs to you on your mortgage, on your auto loans. At the end of the
Michael,
day,
can I interrupt here for a second, Michael?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think people should just focus on this simple chart you have here.
Please.
Just so we can walk through it. So what I see over here is the tax breaks cost $3.87 trillion.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, they say that they're going to slash federal spending, but all they slash is 1.2 trillion.
That's right.
So then you have to subtract 1.2 trillion from the 3.8 trillion. That brings you down to
about
approximately 3.6 trillion.
That's right.
And then you also have to then add in the debt payments.
That's right.
Interest payments, which is another 551. And when you add that 551 back into that original number, and you add it up, you get back here to almost a $3 trillion cost for the bill.
That's
So
exactly right.
it's like, hey, look at our big cuts over here, 1.2. Don't look at the tax break, 3.87, and don't look at the debt. Don't look at the interest payments, because if you added those two numbers together, minus the relatively small, savings compared to their tax rate. I mean, they're
Right.
not small because they slash Medicare and Medicaid
That's right.
and food and nutrition. But look at what you wind up with at the end of the day, just 3 trillion more. And with their crocodile tears, they're saying, oh, we care about the deficit.
Right.
And the tax breaks are going to pay for them.
That's
And why aren't the tax breaks going to pay for it, Michael? I think that's the answer we all want to hear.
Well, I think that most people on this call will know better than any of your Republican colleagues that tax breaks for the rich never trickle down to anybody else. For years, they have been saying, if we cut taxes for the top, if we cut taxes for corporations that ship jobs overseas, don't worry, that money will trickle down to everybody else, and the economic growth will be so enormous that it will pay for itself. Well, we have tried that so many times, as recently as 2017. And the truth of the matter is, and every single person on this call knows it in their hearts and in their souls, tax cuts for the rich are not free. We all end up paying for them. We pay for them in higher interest costs. We pay for them in the lack of investment in our communities. We pay for them in cuts to our health care and our food assistance. This idea that if we just give rich people even more money, the economy will be better, it misses where real prosperity and growth comes from. And Dave just said it. Real prosperity and growth comes from the American worker and the American consumer and everyday families, not rich people sitting in boardrooms, not private equity or hedge fund managers. And if we give more tax breaks to the people at the top, the same thing's going to happen that happens every single time. More money will go to the top and it'll stay at the top, but it doesn't help anybody else.
Fabulous. Well, this is just like you're saying, the math is simple. It's actually just arithmetic.
It's just arithmetic. It's
Just
exactly
simple
right.
arithmetic. So
thank you, Senator. Thank you so much for having me,
Yeah.
and I appreciate everything that you're doing. And thank you to everybody who's joining. And I'll hand it back over to you.
thank you. And this is a teach-in. So, and you were great, Michael. Thank you. And you're teaching me. And now we're going to reach our big conclusion here. And to do that, we've got a superstar from the Center for American Progress, Joe Radosevic.
That's very good.
Joe Radosevic from Croatia, originally,
A long time to
wherever
get
they
that
all
far.
started, way back there. But this is just the progressive face of the Democratic Party, the Center for American Progress. And thank you, Joe, for leading tonight.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for making this space available. Thank you for everyone who is spending part of their evening learning about what Republicans have been, trying to hide from the American people. And we're going to make them unsuccessful at that. Something that, is really important as we're thinking about, we've learned a lot about this bill. I learned a lot about this bill today. Actually, I didn't know a lot of some of those education pieces. Is they're trying to create a sense that it is inevitable, that it's a done deal, that what they are doing is going to be rammed through and no one can do anything about it. But it's not true. I mean, we learned today that some of their timelines were changing. We learned that some of what they had planned to, gut clean energy investments, that was changing. So that idea that this is inevitable and that you don't have power to influence it is bull. And now is such a critical time to fight back. If we go to the next slide, let's just put this in some simple context. Our advocacy is having an impact, right? Like the political space to do some of these very unpopular things, that political space exists when you have a really popular president. That's not what's happening right now. And the more pressure we put on makes it a lot harder when this bill goes over to the House to actually pass the thing, right? We need to have some people feeling a lot of pressure and saying, I can't do this piece, this cut to, what you have planned, how that would impact rural public schools. that's a bridge too far for me. Every little piece that we can do here is going to make people's lives better, and that political space matters. The next slide, this is the really tip of the spear right now. Trump's doing plenty of bad things, but what is in this bill is going to have such a devastating impact on millions and millions of people. Something about half of the country know people or personally depend on programs like Medicaid and SNAP. This bill is going to touch everyone's lives in some ways. And it is the key to bringing down what is this, fledgling authoritarian regime. It is kind of maybe trite to sort of say, like, save Medicaid, save democracy, but there's a piece of truth in that because we are showing people their own power when we defeat some of these proposals. So you got the data. That's part of what this slide is for. You learned a lot tonight. There's plenty of other information that'll be sent around after this. But the next slide, it's really important to turn that data into a story. You have to have something people can remember. It's hard to remember a bunch of different numbers, not that they're not important, not that the facts don't matter. And as Democrats, liberals, sometimes we really like to know our facts first. But stories it's how people think. It's how, it is basic kind of cognition. It's all the social science research shows. It's how we remember things. It's how we make sense of the world. And so as advocates yourself, think about the story that you can tell. How does this connect to your life? Do you have a cousin? Was your father someone who needed Medicaid at some point? What is your personal connection to some of these programs, whether it's in education, whether it's in clean energy? We heard about a lot of the great work that different people's action campaigns are engaged on here. Make it personal to you. That's what someone is going to remember. If you go to the next slide, and here's why that really matters in this bill. There's no bad way to attack it. People hate what's in this bill so much. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to have the perfect phrase. You don't need to avoid one thing that you might be a little more interested in because we only have to talk about, Medicaid, for example. Part I think these teach-ins are about is showing people all the different impacts in the bill. And what research that Michael's group, Michael Linden from Families Over Billionaires was just presenting, research that they've done, we've been able to partner with them on, it really shows that if you learn about this bill, you don't like it. Doesn't matter kind of what side of the ideological spectrum you are on. So this chart at the top, the pie chart, that just asks, have you heard a lot about the bill? And you can see 30-some% say they've heard a lot, 40 saying some. So there's a lot of people who need to learn a little more. That's okay. That's why we're here. Then we asked, for the people who have heard a lot, what do you think of it? And you can see 60% don't like it. And we go to the next slide. When we gave a very neutral description, kind of like what a news article or AP story would say about the bill. We can go to the next slide, please. They'll do great. It's just simple, cuts Medicaid, but it eliminates these tax credits. So it does border security, right? Some of the stuff Republicans like to talk about, makes some of these tax cuts permanent. People don't like it. They don't like it by a margin of 22 points. And they actually don't like it in basically the same margin that the folks who've already heard about the bill don't like it. So this isn't the kind of situation where only people who are really paying attention to the news don't like what's in the bill. This is a situation where Americans don't like what's in the bill. And so I think this is actually pretty empowering as someone who is thinking about how to engage right now, because you don't need to worry about, I'm going to focus on this part. I need to say it the right way. You just need to use your voice. That is really the only test right now. If we can make someone sort of Google, what does this big something bill do? That's a huge go up that ladder of engagement, having them call their members. That's a simple ask. You can call the switchboard, they'll connect them to the right office. Go old school. You don't need to think about, like, again, the perfect way to engage. So if you're going to a 4th of July parade, if you're a really good artist, make a sign, have a handout, you listen to talk radio, call in. Like, the most important piece here, politics about socializing conflict, politics about making people aware of what's happening. The most important thing here is to use your voice in however way you want. And I think that as a movement, as a party, that's something that we all need to be a little bit better at, just empowering people to have the impact however they can do it. What are some of the ideas here? Letters to the editor, of course, especially in smaller papers. If you have a holiday list, send a postcard to it. All these things sometimes can be a little uncomfortable. That's probably a decent sign that it might be a little surprising to people. It might make a little bit of an impact. So that is a good feeling. I think with that, I just want to return to something that Randy was saying, something I sort of said up top. This is not inevitable. This bill is changing every day. And the sense that we do not have power, that is our biggest enemy. And something like this, these teach-ins, is how we, push back on that. Celebrate the little wins that we have already had, and encourage people to do more. So I want to thank Senator Markey and your team for making this space and bringing everyone together. And for everyone on here, really think about, what's your story? Why are you here? Why are you interested in politics or in making a difference? Having that be part of how you're talking about this bill really helps people that you're talking to remember it and ultimately oppose it and maybe pick up the phone themselves.
Fabulous. Great job. That was just such a great job. And I thank you so much for all of those organizing tips that you have brought to us. And Randy, I don't know if you're still here, but love to have you kind of wrap this up, if you would, just to give us the final charge. And if not, then I'll just say what Randy would say. This is it. We're there fighting for democracy. We're fighting for everything that began 250 years ago, 1775. And those people rose up against the dictator. They rose up against the king. They just would not allow for those kind of arbitrary actions to continue without resistance. And the same thing was true for the abolitionists, for the suffragettes, the civil rights volunteers that went south, the same-sex marriage movement leaders. They all said, no, we're not going to take it. We're going to stand up and fight. And they got knocked down. But they didn't get knocked out. They just kept getting back up, and they fought. And that's all we can ask everyone tonight to do. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep working. And we can make a difference. We can win this. And so for everyone who joined us tonight, thank you for joining us. And for our teachers, for our professors tonight in this teach-in, just brilliance, just absolute brilliance. So thank you. And I'm going to see all of you soon, because I'm going to be out there fighting, and I'll see you along the trail.